Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's lesson. Let's go over today's lesson objective. So today we will classify three-dimensional figures based on attributes. Okay, awesome, fantastic. Now, before we get into our lesson, let's go over our lesson success criteria. So our one lesson success criteria for today is I can classify 3D shapes or three-dimensional shapes based on attributes. All right, let's go ahead and dive into our vocabulary for today. So, we have a lot of vocabulary for today, but let's go ahead and get started. So, our first vocabulary word is attributes. So, what attributes are they're just characteristics used to describe something. So, over here we have a square. We also can see that the square is orange and it's large, right? It has other ones could be it has four sides, it has corner angles. These are all attributes. All right, now let's go ahead and go on to what is a three-dimensional figure. So three-dimensional figures are solids with length, height, and width that take up space. So two-dimensional figures only have length and width. So for example, we have a square right here, right? It's flat, it's not going to turn into anything. But if we add height, it turns into a cube. So that square is going to grow and it's going to take up space. All right. Now, let's quickly talk about what does congruent mean. So congruent means exactly the same shape or size. So this pentagon is congruent to that pentagon. So they are equal. They are the exact same shape and the exact same size. They are congruent. All right. Let's talk about what is a face. So a face is a flat surface of a solid object. So over here we have a cube and the flat part is the face. That is the flat part of an object, the flat part of a 3D object. And not all 3D objects will have faces, but if it's flat, it's going to be a face. All right, and edges. Edges are where two faces meet on a three-dimensional object. So right here, we have this square. Let me change the color. So we have this edge right here because one square meets with another square. So that are two faces and they meet, and that is the edge. So we have a lot of edges on 3D shapes, but an edge is where the faces meet on a 3D object. All right, and a vertex. So a vertex is the point where two edges meet. So over here, we see that the edges meet over there at the kind of corner. So that is a vertex. Over here, we see the point right there. That is a vertex. So vertexes are where two edges meet on a three-dimensional shape. And we see them on two-dimensional shapes as well. All right, so that is all of our attribute vocabulary words. Now we're going to go into some shapes and how do we actually name some shapes. So this one right over here, this is called a triangular prism. So a prism is basically going to be anything that kind of joins shapes, and it uses rectangles to join them together. But a rectangular prism is a three-dimensional figure where there are two triangular faces and three rectangular faces. So the big thing about a prism is it's going to have two congruent shapes. So that means the same on opposite ends, and then it's going to be joined together by rectangular faces. So in this case, we have a triangular prism. So the base, one face is a triangle, and the other face is an identical or a congruent triangle, and they're joined together by rectangles. All right, let's go ahead and go on to our next vocabulary word. Now, we're going to go into a rectangular prism. So what is a rectangular prism? It's like a triangular prism, but instead of triangles, we're seeing a rectangle on the faces. All of them are rectangles, right? So it's a three-dimensional solid made up of only rectangular faces. So the faces, there's going to be two congruent rectangular faces, and then they're going to be joined together by rectangles. That is a prism. All right, and last but not least is we have a cube. A cube is kind of a special type of rectangular prism because it is a three-dimensional solid with 6 square faces. So remember, a square is a special type of rectangle. So a cube is going to have all of the faces be squares. So this square is going to be a congruent or an identical square to that square, and then all the other squares. All right, now before we kind of get into our last couple shapes, let's go ahead and look at some examples of our prisms, right? So over here, we see that we have a couple of shapes over here, right? So let's first look at this one right here. So let me move this one over just a little bit. So if we look at this shape right over here, this is going to be a rectangular prism. Why is it a rectangular prism? Because the top of it is going to be is a square or a special type of rectangle, and then the bottom of it is also a square, and that's a special type of rectangle. But the other sides are rectangles. They're not squares. They're just regular rectangles. So this is going to be a rectangular prism. So let's take a look at this shape when we unfold it. So I'm going to go ahead and unfold it. And if we see over here, we unfolded our rectangular prism. And so we have 1, 2, 3, 4 rectangles and then 2 squares, right? This is a rectangular prism because our shapes, we have our 2 bases are going to be rectangles. In this case, it's a square, and then the rest of them are rectangles. So if we fold these back up, we have ourselves a rectangular prism. All right, let's go ahead and compare this to this shape over here, which is a cube. So I see over here I have a square, and then if I turn them around, that's a square. All of my sides are squares. So this is similar to a rectangular prism, except it's a cube because all of our rectangles are square. So if I unfold it, we'll see that all of our faces are identical squares, right? So this is what a cube looks like when it's unfolded. And then if we fold it back up, we have ourselves a cube. It's a 3D shape. All right, fantastic. And now last but not least, our last shape over here. This is actually going to be a triangular prism because the base, we have one side, which is a triangle, and then the opposite side, we have another congruent triangle. But our sides are all rectangles, right? So let's go ahead and unfold this and see what it looks like, right? So we have a triangle over here and another triangle and then 3 rectangle faces. So that is going to make our triangular prism. All right, so there are our prisms. Now let's go ahead and go back because we're going to go review a couple more shapes, right? So we have our cube. Now let's go into what is a sphere. So a sphere is a 3-dimensional round figure with no edges or vertices. It looks like a ball. So think of any balls that we have: basketballs, beach balls, soccer balls, tennis balls. All of these are examples of spheres. It doesn't have any edges, and it's just a round figure, right? So that is a sphere. Now let's go ahead and go into what is a cylinder. So a cylinder is a 3-dimensional solid with 2 equal sized circular bases and no vertices. So there's no edges, there's no pointy edges, right? Because we don't have any faces, or I'm sorry, we actually do have edges. So we have edges over here, because that's where it connects. And then we have an edge at the bottom. So we have 2 edges, but they're kind of circular. And then, but it has no vertices. We don't have any points on our cylinder, right? So this is a cylinder. So we have 2 circles on the top and the bottom. And then we're going to connect it with 1 sheet all the way around. All right, now let's go ahead and go into our last 3D shape. So our last 3D shape that we're going to go over today is a cone. So a cone is a 3-dimensional figure that has 1 vertex and a circular base. So if we look over here, this is going to be a circle at the bottom, and then it's going to have all of the points. It's going to go straight up and go and all meet at a point at the top, right? So it's going to have 1 vertex at the very top, and the rest of the edges are going to be smooth, or the rest of the sides are going to be smooth on the top, and then we have 1 edge at the bottom. All right, let's look at some real world examples of these last 3. So we have over here we have some ice cream cones, right? So over here we have a shape that is cones, right? Let me go ahead and move my face out of the way. So we have cones right over here. And we can see that this is a cone, like an ice cream cone, right? We also see the birthday hats. So an ice cream cone is going to have a circle at the bottom, like a base. And then it's going to have one piece that's just going to wrap around and kind of have a point at the bottom. So that is a cone. Like, so examples we'll see is ice cream cones or birthday hats. Those are examples of cones. Now over here, we have I'm going to change the color, a cylinder. So we see this with soup cans. We might see it with soda cans. So the cylinder is we have a circle base at the bottom, right? And then we're going to have another circle base. A circle base at the top and a circle base at the bottom. And then it's going to be connected with one sheet that's going to wrap all the way around. That is a cylinder. Okay, and then last but not least is we have an example of a ball, and the geometric term that we use is a sphere. So we'll see this in examples of basketballs, soccer balls, tennis balls, ping pong balls, all sorts of different balls, right? So those are examples of spheres. It's round, it has no edges, no vertexes, everything on it is smooth, and it's like a perfect circle all the way around. All right, fantastic. So let's go ahead and review our lesson objective. So today we classified three-dimensional figures based on attributes. All right, fantastic. So thank you so much for joining me today, everybody. And I hope you had a wonderful time learning with me, and I'll see you next time.